Thank you, Madam President. I did not intend to speak today. I came down here and listened to the speeches of some of my colleagues for 2 hours this morning and asked for an opportunity to get on the list of what are nearly 50 senators who are going to speak today. But I heard loud and clear some of the comments. I just wanted to go back and revisit them and talk about maybe the path forward after this vote occurs today, and I hope fails to change the filibuster rule. I think Senator Tester was the one who said he knew of a voter who waited 8 to 10 hours to vote. That's unacceptable. We need to change that. I would also say that probably over that 8 to 10 hours, they run a long line far beyond any restrictions they have for electioneering, so they could have food and water. Some people could have heard that speech and thought that someone was starving or thirsting to death for 8 or 10 hours, but we all know that most states have laws that allow anyone to provide food or water to others 50 feet away from the election sites. And I know if you've ever been in elections, you've been there too. I've been there handing out my push card 50 feet out, handing people water. That happens every day. The American people need to know that. And if there are states that have restrictions, that's something I hope I have a moment to talk about as we move forward. We also heard Senator Klobuchar say that 160 times the rules have changed. The fact of the matter is, they have never changed for the legislative calendar, which is what we're talking about, without regular order. It happened 7 times. And it happened because the majority of members, Democrats and Republicans, thought that we should modernize the rules. But we did it through regular order. It's never been done before. In fact, the 2 notable examples where the nuclear option was used was once by then Majority Leader Harry Reid and followed up by then Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. If that's not the best indicator of what will happen to this body, nothing is. Remember when Senator Reid said, we're just going to carve out a little bit of the executive calendar to make it easier for district judges to get elected. That's all we're going to do. Why on earth does anybody believe that that carve-out wasn't going to result in the ultimate nuclear option for the executive calendar? That's why you have Justice Gorsuch, Justice Kavanaugh, and Justice Barrett. That's why you have it. This is political physics here. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And if you vote to nuke the legislative filibuster, you might as well build a wall straight down this body. Because anytime Democrats or Republicans hit the trifecta, and we have the White House, and we have the Senate, and we have the House, the minority's voice will count for nothing. And even worse, the voices of the vocal minority at either end of the political spectrum will have a disproportionate impact on what we vote on and pass out of this body. If you think it's hard getting the voting rights bills passed today, just think how hard it's going to be for you to stand down your most extreme base, we've got our own, on things that are not good for this country that the vast majority of the American people will not support. We will go to an every 2-year or 4-year cycle of huge swings for the first time ever in this nation's history. So I hope that last week, most of you had the opportunity. I was in the chamber, but if you weren't, I would ask you to go back and listen to Senator Sinema's speech. Some people would have just spiked the football on our side of the aisle saying it looks like she'll preserve the filibuster, we can move on. But what I heard was a member calling on us to bridge the gap and make progress. That's what I heard. And on voting rights, I think we can. I think the American people need to know that if this fails today, it's not the end of the discussion of progress that we need to make. My staff said, we don't want you to put this board up because we're afraid that'll tip your hand on things that you're having discussions with. I've had a number of discussions with members on the other side of the aisle. We have legitimate problems that we need to fix. We need to make it harder to cheat and easier to vote. We need to reform the Electoral Count Act that, with all due respect to the majority leader, I think that he said it's unacceptable and insufficient and even offensive because he said scorekeeping matters little if the game is rigged. If the game is rigged, that sounds like what President Trump was saying just about 18 months ago. Now we've got both sides of the aisle talking about how the game is rigged. What we're doing is creating more discontent, and we're actually suppressing people's interest in voting because they think their vote won't count. That's what's being said in this chamber today. That's what we have to stop. There are a number of things that we can do. I voted against all the objections of my 7 Democratic colleagues on January the 6th. Stand by it, proud. I was proud to certify that election. But since 2001, the Electoral Count Act has been weaponized. You had 14 House members object in 2001. You had 31 House members, a Senate member, object in 2005. You had 7 House members object in 2017. And we had 138 House members and 7 Senate members object in this last election. It's clearly become weaponized. We clearly have to make it clear that the vice president's in a ministerial position and there should be a higher bar for lodging an objection. There are other things that we could do for the certifying agencies across the states to say you can't change the rules after the election is held. That's what we should be talking about. We should be talking about making it easier to vote. I don't know why New York rejected by a 58 to 42 margin same-day registration last year, but they did. The voters went to the polls, and I'm reminded of you saying that the legislature overturned it. So now is the legislature in New York going to overturn 58% against same-day registration and 54% against no-excuse absentee ballot? I've got no-excuse absentee ballot in North Carolina. I think we should encourage more states to do the same. So where does this need to head? After the tensions cool, and after what I hope is a failed vote today to change the rules. And incidentally, the day that Republicans changed the rules for the filibuster is the day I resigned from the Senate. And I believe that I have a number of members on my side of the aisle that would never do it. So you don't have to worry about the argument. If you don't change it now, they'll just change it when they hit the trifecta. It's not going to happen. And Senator Kaine, I think I was naive. When I signed that letter saying after President Trump called for nuking the filibuster 34 times, I said, get me on a letter to preserve the filibuster. I went home and I was attacked. I've had the protesters, I've had the censure proposals at county GOPs and state GOPs, and I stand by it, and I'll stand by it as long as I'm here. But I have to say I feel a little bit disappointed and a little bit betrayed by the fact that the 32 members who signed it on the Democrat side, all but one, now say, well, things have changed. They haven't changed. And we can't let this filibuster change. We need to work on making it easier to vote. We need to work on making it harder to cheat. There are reasonable solutions that I think both sides of the aisle can agree to. And the American people need to know that there are people like me and other members that are going to fight for that after this vote hopefully goes down today. Let's not build a wall between our two chambers. Let's continue the relationships that we have. I had 5 conversations with members on the other side of the aisle this morning talking about legislation we're working on, a visit to North Carolina to spend some time together outside of the political cauldron that we're in here now, helping somebody out with a vote in judiciary for a judicial nominee that you otherwise may be incented to vote against. But let me tell you, if you want to destroy that opportunity moving forward, vote to nuke the filibuster. Vote to have any rational basis for working with members when one of us hits the trifecta. But I do hope after this vote fails today that members will answer the call to fix what's wrong with our system, fix the Electoral Count Act, make it easier to vote and harder to cheat. Thank you, Madam President.